If this works, we gotta get more.
The movie begins in the year 2169, a world where people are genetically designed to stop aging at 25. Afterward, they are granted a single free year to live, tracked by a timer etched into their forearm. When the timer hits 0, they time out and die instantly. In this society, time is currency, used in transactions, traded between people, or stored in capsules. The United States is divided into time zones, with Dayton as the poorest and New Greenwich as the wealthiest, where the rich enjoy effective immortality. In the struggling district of Dayton, a young factory worker named Will Salas shares a modest apartment with his mother, Rachel. Will and his best friend, Borrell, labor daily at a local factory, their wages docked arbitrarily by the administration. One evening, Will visits a bar to unwind after work. There, he notices a wealthy man named Henry buying drinks for everyone, flaunting the century displayed on his timer. This display of wealth catches the eye of a gang called the Minutemen, led by Fortis. The gang corners Henry and challenges him to a deadly time fight. As chaos erupts and patrons flee, Will stays hidden, observing. Henry accepts the duel but requests a moment to prepare in the bathroom, where he's escorted by a gang member. Seizing the opportunity, Will knocks the thug unconscious and escapes with Henry through the back door. They find refuge in a nearby factory, where Will questions Henry's presence in Dayton. Henry reveals he's 105 years old, weary of endless life, and disillusioned by a system where the rich hoard time, driving up the cost of survival for the poor. After a deep conversation, the two men fall asleep. At dawn, Henry awakens first and transfers nearly all his time to Will, leaving himself with a mere 5 minutes. When Will wakes to discover his timer has surged, he peers outside to find Henry sitting alone on a bridge. Realizing Henry's intent, Will rushes to intervene but arrives too late. Henry times out, his lifeless body plunging into the river. The narrative shifts to that evening, where Will anxiously waits for his mother at the bus stop. Hours pass and she doesn't arrive. Rachel, with only an hour and a half left on her timer, is stranded, unable to afford the suddenly increased bus fare. It's a 2-hour walk for Rachel to get home, leaving her with no choice but to run if she wants to see her son again. At the same time, Will realizes what's happening and starts running toward her. Their paths finally cross in the middle of the street, but it's too late. Rachel tragically times out in Will's arms. Meanwhile, the timekeepers, a police force tasked with enforcing the time economy, discover Henry's body in the river. Agent Leon leading the investigation, suspects foul play. Security footage from a nearby CCTV is reviewed, but the camera's angle obscures Henry's fall. Instead, the footage captures Will's face, leading the timekeepers to assume he is responsible. Devastated by his mother's death, Will embarks on a reckless spending spree to cope with his grief. Using his newfound wealth, he hires a limo and heads to New Greenwich. Upon arriving in the opulent city, he checks into a luxurious hotel, drawing the attention of Sylvia, a young socialite. However, Will's rapid crossing of time zones alerts the timekeepers, who begin tracking his movements. That evening, Will, dressed in a sharp new suit, visits a casino and joins a poker table hosted by Philippe Weiss, a powerful businessman who controls the time system through his banks. Sylvia, Philippe's daughter, watches intently as Will takes daring risks, ultimately betting all he has. His gamble pays off, winning him the game and Philippe's attention. Impressed, Philippe invites Will to a grand party at his mansion. The next day, Will purchases a luxury car and drives to the event. At the mansion, Sylvia's curiosity about Will grows, and she invites him to dance. During their conversation, she astutely observes that his mannerisms betray his origins in the ghetto. Sylvia admits her envy of people from Dayton, lamenting her own life's lack of freedom and excitement. Inspired by her yearning for adventure, Will leads her to the beach behind the house for a daring skinny dip. Though hesitant at first, Sylvia joins him, and the two share a playful, carefree moment. They later return to the mansion through separate entrances to avoid drawing attention. Their evening is cut short when the timekeepers arrive, having tracked Will using his new car. Will is taken to a private office for questioning. Despite his claim that Henry willingly timed out, the timekeepers dismiss his story and confiscate most of his time. Left with only 2 hours, barely enough for booking and processing, Will is thrust back into a race against time. Just then, Philippe and Sylvia arrive to assess the situation. Will seizes the moment, using the distraction to overpower the timekeepers and steal a gun. He quickly takes Sylvia hostage, and the two escape through the back door, making their way to Will's car. While driving, Will's attention is caught by a security camera, and he doesn't notice a spike strip in time. The car hits it at high speed, swerving violently before crashing by the roadside. The impact renders both Will and Sylvia unconscious, and moments later, they are found by Fortis and his gang. The Minutemen begin draining Sylvia's time, but flee when they hear the timekeepers approaching. By the time Will and Sylvia wake, Sylvia's timer has dropped to just 30 minutes. Panicked, she pleads for Will's help. Will, with a touch of irony, remarks on how quickly she's come to appreciate sharing, but he assists her anyway. The two set off on foot toward Dayton, hoping to trade Sylvia's valuable earrings for time. They reach a pawn shop, where the jewelry is exchanged for a mere 2 days. Next, they head to a payphone. Will has Sylvia call her father, knowing the call will be intercepted. As expected, Agent Leon answers at the Philippe residence. Unfazed, Will demands a ransom of 1,000 years for Sylvia, but insists the time be distributed to the ghetto's timeline system rather than kept for himself. The timeline acts as a lifeline for Dayton's impoverished residents, allowing them to access life-saving time. After the call, Leon informs Philippe of Will's demands, but Philippe's hesitation reveals his reluctance to part with any of his wealth, even for his daughter. Back in Dayton, Will takes Sylvia to his apartment, where they spend the night. The next morning, Will watches the timeline building from his window, waiting for the promised time to arrive. Hours pass, but nothing happens, confirming Philippe's refusal to pay the ransom. Sylvia is heartbroken by her father's indifference and begins to see the darker truths of his wealth, built on the oppression of others. Her perspective shifts, and she decides to stay and fight alongside Will. However, she requests one final conversation with her father. Will gives her the stolen gun for protection and waits nearby as she makes the call. Sylvia angrily berates Philippe for his greed, but her focus shifts when she spots Agent Leon approaching Will. Reacting quickly, Sylvia exits the phone booth and shoots Leon in the arm, halting his advance. Will seizes the moment to check Leon's timer and discovers the agent keeps only a minimal amount of time, an intentional deterrent against theft. In an act of compassion, Will gives Agent Leon some of his time, ensuring his colleagues can rescue him. With that, Will and Sylvia escape in Leon's car, leaving the timekeeper to be saved by his team. Later, Will uses the government car to impersonate a timekeeper, stopping a wealthy woman on her way to New Greenwich. He takes her earrings and most of her time before speeding off in her car. When the fugitives pause to check the news, they discover they've been labeled as wanted criminals. Determined to make a real impact, they decide to target the Philippe family's Dayton Time Bank. They commandeer a truck and crash it into the bank, stealing as many time capsules as possible. The impoverished citizens of Dayton join in, looting the remaining capsules. By the time the timekeepers arrive, the bank is empty. Will distributes the stolen time to the timeline, instructing the clerk to share it with those in need. Over the following days, he and Sylvia rob time banks across the region, their escapades making frequent headlines. A week later, Leon tracks them to Will's apartment. As the timekeepers close in, Will and Sylvia escape through a window. Leon quickly realizes they're on the run and gives chase, but the pair board a local bus, bribing the driver to speed away. Hours later, Will and Sylvia check into a hotel, bribing the receptionist for secrecy and renting all the rooms. Despite their precautions, another guest spots them heading upstairs. Meanwhile, the Minutemen escalate their search, threatening and even killing people to extract information. The hotel guest eventually reveals what he saw. At the hotel, Will and Sylvia learn there's a 10-year bounty on their heads, a sum they dismiss as insulting. Suddenly, Fortis and his gang burst into their room, holding the couple at gunpoint. Fortis explains his arrangement with the authorities. They overlook his crimes as long as he maintains order in Dayton. Now he's been tasked with restoring control for the rich. Rather than killing Will outright, Fortis proposes a time fight, a battle of endurance and strategy, where opponents try to drain each other's time through locked hands. Will accepts the challenge. He lets Fortis gain the upper hand initially, but as the gangster grows overconfident, Will shifts tactics and siphons all of Fortis's time in a single, decisive move. By the time the timekeepers arrive, Will and Sylvia have vanished, and Fortis has timed out. Later, Will notices prices for essentials skyrocketing as the wealthy attempt to counter the influx of time on the streets. Their small-scale heists aren't enough to disrupt the system. They need something bigger, like 1,000,000 years. Sylvia knows exactly where to find such an amount. The next day, Philippe arrives at work flanked by bodyguards, concerned about the growing chaos. Sylvia appears, announcing her intent to surrender. Philippe, trusting his daughter, lets her approach. The distraction allows Will to sneak up and take Philippe hostage. They force him into his office and make him open the safe containing a capsule with 1,000,000 years. Philippe warns that flooding the system with such an amount could destabilize everything. Will retorts that this is precisely their goal. After locking Philippe in his office, the duo escapes with the capsule. The news of the theft reaches the timekeepers, and Leon leads the pursuit. In his haste, Leon forgets to collect his daily time allowance, leaving himself with just an hour on his timer. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia race toward Dayton, evading bullets as they crash through the time zone barrier. Once in Dayton, Will steps out of the vehicle and hands the million-year capsule to a young girl living on the streets, ensuring the time will be shared among those who need it most. Leon arrives moments later, and Will and Sylvia pretend to surrender. Confident in his victory, Leon lets his guard down, but just then, the timeline broadcasts an announcement. There's now plenty of time for everyone. The streets erupt with an eager crowd surging forward to claim their share, creating chaos and blocking Leon's path. Taking advantage of the commotion, the fugitives escape. Determined, Leon manages to get into his car and resumes the chase. When Will and Sylvia cross another time zone barrier, he's forced to continue on foot. Eventually, he catches up to them. Will guesses that Leon was once from the ghetto himself, a suspicion the timekeeper confirms. Leon explains that he worked hard to escape Dayton, believing that's how the system should work. However, when Leon moves to arrest them, Will points out the futility. They all have only minutes left. Checking his timer, Leon realizes too late that he's neglected to collect his pay. His clock runs out, and he collapses lifeless on the road. With less than a minute left on their own timers, Will and Sylvia share a passionate kiss. Then, in a flash of realization, Will remembers that the timekeepers store time in their vehicles. He sprints to Leon's car, retrieves a capsule, and races back to Sylvia. They meet just in time, sharing enough moments to survive. Back in New Greenwich, Philippe surrenders to the inevitable. Resigned, he instructs his employees to stand down, admitting that the collapse of the system is unavoidable. Across the nation, news broadcasts show people taking to the streets in celebration and defiance. Factories grind to a halt, and the barriers between time zones crumble as people pour into New Greenwich, breaking down the old divides. At the timekeeper's office, employees abandon their posts, recognizing the futility of their efforts. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia remain elusive, their quest far from over. They set their sights on even bigger banks, determined to ensure the old system can never be rebuilt. And with that, this story ends here. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like our channel and subscribe if you enjoy content like this. Also, let us know what movie you would love us to recap for you.